Although we have 2 members that were out, now we're down to 1, members that are coming in from conflicting committee schedules. They'll be there as soon as we can. We do have a quorum present. Since this is the committee's first meeting, there will be no minutes to approve. We will share reading of the committee rules at a later date, but for now, we will use House Rules 6.21 and the customs and usage to guide the Public Safety Committee. At the request of the Sergeant of Arms Office, we do have several rules that we are going to be reading. And the first is that the committee expects proper decor at all times. All dialogue goes through the chair. Signs are not allowed in the committee room. There will be no outburst or clapping. There's no standing or sitting in the aisles or walkways. If an accommodation is needed, communicate that with the sergeant's staffs. There will be consequences if there is a disruption. Thank you to the Sergeant Arms staff who are present for helping maintain decorum in the committee room. We'll begin our first meeting with an introduction of the members and the staff. Members, please tell us your district and communities you represent, your professional background. Staff, tell us your roles here at the House, and we will start with the researcher, J.R. Swanson.
My name is J.R. Swanson. I've been with the House for 5 years, and I'm the House Republican researcher.
Representative Matt Bliss, representing 2B, northern Minnesota, basically from the lower shores of Upper Red Lake to just north of Detroit Lakes. My 4th term in the legislature. My career was in IT, and I'm also a small business owner.
All right, Representative Terry Steer, 22B, so that's LeSueur County, Belle Plaine, a little bit of underneath Mankato. This is my 1st term.
Representative Walter Hudson, District 30A, half of Otsego, St. Michael, Albertville, Hanover, Rockford Township. My background's rather eclectic. Worked in private security for some time, have done a lot of commentary and media production. Was an operations manager for a logistics company, and recently worked for the Republican Party.
Representative Aaron Rapinski, 26A, which is essentially Winona County, southeast Minnesota. I too have a pretty vast background. I am a former firefighter. I'm also a master captain credentialed Coast Guard captain. And this is one of the committees I'm on. I'm also on public safety, health and finance, and military and veterans affairs.
Ben Johnson, I'm with the Nonpartisan House Research Department. I staff this committee, and I also staff the Judiciary Committee and a handful of other subject areas.
Mary McNamara, and I've been with the House since 2018, and I'm a committee legislative assistant.
I'm the chair, Paul Novotny. I represent 30B, which is Elk River, parts of Otsego, now then, and parts of Oak Grove. My background is I had 33 years in law enforcement, and I've been in the legislature 5 years, going into my 6th year now.
Good afternoon, John Hultquist. I'm committee administrator for this committee. I'm also committee administrator for the House Veterans and Military Affairs Committee. I've been with the House since 2011, assisting in public safety and veterans area issues in much of that time.
John Walls, House Fiscal Analysis. I serve this committee and Judiciary Finance.
Good afternoon, Jeff Diebel. I'm also with House Research, and I staff the Veterans and Military Affairs Committee in addition to this role.
Representative Bedell Duran, representing 2A, background is military and law enforcement.
Good afternoon, I'm Representative Bobby Harder. I represent 17B, which would be parts of the counties of Sibley, McLeod, and Carver. And this is my 2nd term, and before I was the state representative, I was a county commissioner in Sibley County. Glad to be on this committee. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Erica Schwartz, and I represent Nicollet County, which is 18A, which covers North Mankato, St. Peter, Nicollet. And this is my first time being here, so I'm excited to be on this committee.
Good afternoon. My name is Jeff Whitty. I'm Vice Chair of the Public Safety Committee, but I'm also a retired Burnsville police officer, 27 years. This is my second term on this Public Safety Committee.
Good afternoon, everybody. Elliot Engen. I serve Lionel Lakes, Centerville, Circle Pines, White Bear Township, and North Oaks, and I have a background in prosecution assistance.
Thank you, and I'd like to recognize that Chair of the Ways and Means Committee, Representative Torkelson, is sitting in on this meeting. The chair in this session is going to be focusing Public Safety Committee over what we've done for the last 5 years that I've been in the legislature. Nothing drives me crazier than hearing someone say that their number one factor or their number one priority, and they'll say over again, their number one priority. We had a governor a couple of years back that had untold number one priorities. The Public Safety Committee, for me, was shaped on the priority, a quote from Governor Schwarzkopf, the first governor, or General Schwarzkopf of the New Jersey State Police. And to paraphrase him, it's your number one priority is protect victims and prevent further crime. And that, as a chair of this committee, is going to be my focus. My number one focus will be on victims, getting justice for, and preventing further victims. To that end, we will not lose focus of the fact that there are people that have made choices to participate in the criminal justice system. And of those people that have made the choice to participate in the justice system, we will do everything we can to identify, charge, and if they are convicted, get them at a place where they can be corrected, find the answers that they need, because we know that they're going to someday be out on the street again. So we're going to give them a safe place that they can make decisions that will prevent them, hopefully in the future, from participating in the criminal justice system. But we're not going to lose we're not going to lose our focus on those that did not choose to participate because they're victims. With that in mind, our first presenters this session will be members of various law enforcement groups. We are asking them to come on this first day of committee hearings because we want them to know, and we want the public to know, that they are the subject matter experts. And though we might not always take their advice, we feel that they are the ones that are out there every day doing the work. They're the ones that are experiencing what doesn't work. They're the ones that will be the first one to run to the sound of fire, gunfire, whatever it is. They'll be the ones running towards the problems, not away from it. And in recognition of that, we're giving them the first ability to speak in this session. The first group that will be speaking to us is the Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association. They are an association that represents a large amount of the licensed peace officers in that state. I call the representatives of the MPPOA to the stand. Testifying today will be MPPOA President and Hennepin County Sheriff's Deputy Shane Myrie. And it looks like with him are Dave Titus and Brian Peters. I'll have you individually introduce yourself again. And welcome to the committee. Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, Shane Myrie, President of MPPOA.
Dave Titus, Deputy Director.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Brian Peters, Executive Director of the MPPOA.
Mr. Chair and members, thank you for the invitation to come and discuss the legislative priorities for the Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association. At the outset, we'd like to congratulate those that were reelected and those that were newly elected. And more importantly, congratulations on being appointed to what we consider the most important committee in the Minnesota House. I've had a chance to meet with some of you in the past, but for those I have not met, my name is Shane Myrie. As was mentioned earlier, I'm currently a detective with the Major Crimes Division in the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office. I'm also the president of the Hennepin County Sheriff Deputies Association, where our group represents the labor interests of over 250 licensed peace officers against one of the largest local government bureaucracies in the state of Minnesota. And I'm currently the president of the Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association, or MPPOA, which is the largest law enforcement group in the state, focusing on issues faced by rank and file law enforcement and public safety professionals across the state. MPPOA is full of men and women that are committed to public service. Whether it's driven by a family history in law enforcement or an organic, innate, personal drive towards public service, the members of MPPOA go to work every day to keep the communities across Minnesota safe. MPPOA is made up of thousands of committed professionals with diverse experiences and backgrounds, but the common denominator is a commitment to public service. Now, here's the problem. MPPOA's 2024 member survey data shows that 80% of our members indicated that they were either unlikely or very unlikely to recommend the profession to a family member. And the million-dollar question, why? I cannot point to an individual thing that's caused a change in views of our members. I believe it's a combination of several factors interacting all at once, including physical attacks on law enforcement resulting in death, assaults resulting in permanent disfigurement, and an increasing trend of overall assaults on law enforcement. It was reported last year, BCA data showed that in 2017, there were 419 assaults on officers on the job. In 2020, 794 assaults on officers on the job. And in 2023, 1,179 assaults on law enforcement officers on the job. That tripled, that number in 2023 tripled from 2017. Additionally, you throw in anti-police public policy or public policy proposals by both state and local governments, progressive prosecutors, and inflammatory rhetoric by elected officials and coverage by some Minnesota media outlets. Now, I'd like to take a couple of minutes and discuss how that combination of factors I've described impacts the three phases of the law enforcement career life cycle, which is recruiting or hiring, 2, retention or overall job satisfaction, and 3, retirement, which is our pensions. Recruiting. Recently, higher education and law enforcement programs have reported that there's a general decline in law enforcement and criminal justice students. Looking at post-licenses granted over the past couple of years, we know that there were 623 licenses granted in 2024. That was down from 670 licenses in 2023, which was down from 706 licenses in 2022. Looking at the recent post-board job postings, there are over 130 agencies statewide that are hiring. Many have multiple openings, and we are currently around 1,000 officers short in the state of Minnesota right now. Looking at retention, currently we have over 10,400 give or take, licensed peace officers in the state. However, over 2,000 licensed peace officers are eligible for retirement in the next couple of years. Now you look at our retirement and our pension. In para-police and fire, we currently have over 10,000 active members versus over 11,000 retirees. And we already have the highest active member contribution rate in the history of the plan. Mr. Chair and members, we have a structural imbalance in the law enforcement career life cycle here in Minnesota. We're down around 1,000. We have 130 agencies hiring. In 2024, 623 post licenses were granted, and we could lose up to 2,000 in the next couple of years. MPPOA is here today to talk about a legislative agenda that we believe helps to address the problems and fixes for our profession in Minnesota.
Quite enough of that bullshit.
Whatever.
We're done with this. No, this is an illegitimate committee. You don't have quorum in the House. You know this is bullshit.
All right, the meeting can come back to order. For those that have been unable to monitor or see what's going on, the NPPOA representatives have a different obligation that they need to get to. And now, presenting for the Minnesota Minnesota Sheriff's Association will be retired Sheriff James Stewart. Sheriff Stewart, can you introduce yourself and go ahead with your presentation?
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the Public Safety Committee. As was said, my name is James Stewart, retired elected sheriff and current executive director for the Minnesota Sheriff's Association, and I will do my best to not inspire any type of disruption. For those that are unfamiliar or maybe less familiar with the MSA, we have been in existence since 1885, and our members include all of the 87 elected sheriffs as well as the team members from their highly complex offices. They not only represent 100% of Minnesotans, but they do so as highly influential elected officials. The elected sheriffs are heavily involved in their communities through civic events and community engagement, but are also responsible for providing police functions and services, jail operations and oversight, complex civil processes, criminal investigations, court security and judicial operations, water and recreational enforcement, water and transport services, as well as operating a wide array of specialty units to include K-9, SWAT, UAV, Mounted Patrol, Reserves, Chaplain Corps, et cetera, et cetera. Across these many areas, of course, there's never a shortage of challenges that they are facing, but the MSA works very closely with our elected sheriffs to ensure that they are able to embrace each of those challenges as opportunities to write success stories within their communities. Our association routinely provides a wide array of training, both in-person and hybrid across the state. We host a robust online or e-learning platform, which has quickly become a national model. We host 8 annual training conferences per year to ensure that the many specialized areas of the sheriff's offices have the latest information and are provided best practices. And we strive to write success stories around the state and recently offered our annual law enforcement student scholarships to 18 of our future protectors from all across the state of Minnesota. And we also provide legal support and, as you know, legislative support through research and lobbying on behalf of our members and the citizens that they serve, protect, and represent. Today's 2025 legislative priorities for the Minnesota Sheriffs include, I'll run through these for you, the Priority Admissions Task Force, the 48-hour law recommendations. The issue of priority admissions has been studied extensively with 6 legislative work groups or task forces since 2008, identifying capacity as the primary challenge. And the 48-hour statute enacted to expedite treatment cannot be met without significant investment in infrastructure to increase the bed availability. And maintaining a timeline, potentially adjusted from 48 hours, is crucial to ensuring accountability and to prioritize treatment over criminalizing those with mental illness. Currently, individuals committed to the Commissioner of Human Services languish in our county jails after being committed by a judge to the Commissioner of Human Services. We have individuals incarcerated in county jails for more than a year after being sentenced, waiting for available beds in the state of Minnesota. And we recognize that that is not right, and it's not fair to the individuals being ignored by the system that is supposed to be designed to help them. The MSA strongly supports immediate efforts to increase the number of those treatment beds. And it was said, and I can't help it, that it bears repeating, if 1% of the prior budget surplus would have been used for this effort, we wouldn't have to keep bringing it up today. We need to stop criminalizing mental health issues by housing them in jails in institutions that cannot adequately meet their needs and are physically designed for criminals. Our next priority is the Philando Castile Training Fund. Now, this list was developed prior to us learning that these funds had been cut from the governor's budget. Having said that, the Minnesota Sheriff's Association strongly supports the continuation of the Peace Officers Standards and Training or post-board training reimbursement allocation to local law enforcement agencies on a permanent basis. This allocation has provided critical funding to support mandated training for peace officers in the key areas of public safety and community trust building. This funding mechanism allows agencies across Minnesota, regardless of size or geographic location, to provide the mandated training without imposing undue financial burdens on local budgets. By ensuring equitable access to these critical training resources, we enhance both officer safety and community safety as well as support on a statewide basis. This is clearly a value for the community to allow for public safety training. It would be beneficial to everyone involved to have this formula be in perpetuity and be baked into the formula, rather than having all of us spend time every 2 years discussing its obvious worth. History, experience, and practicality tells us that the mandated training will not be reduced, so we ask that we all recognize the need for the funding in perpetuity. Our next topic as a priority is drones. The MSA recommends 3 updates to Minnesota Statute 626.19 to enhance the effectiveness and clarity of unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs, by the use of law enforcement. The first proposed change explicitly allows UAV deployment in time-sensitive missing person cases, providing law enforcement with a critical tool to improve rapid response and outcomes in such emergencies. And my former agency was one of the first in the state to develop a public safety UAV program, and that's because we learned the hard way of how important a rapid response for a tool like this could be, as we conducted a ground search for a young autistic child who was later found face down in a pond. It was not a positive outcome. Had we been able to get into the air in a matter of minutes, I firmly believe the outcome would have been different. It was for that reason the following day I ordered that we would launch a UAV program within our office, because we know, excuse me, that it can save lives. The second change with the UAVs permits use over public or private areas with the written consent of the owner for officer training or public relations purposes, ensuring transparency and maintaining respect for individual privacy. And finally, the third change expands authorized emergency uses of UAVs to include preventing the imminent destruction of evidence, allowing law enforcement to act swiftly in preserving critical information. These updates aim to improve operational efficiency while upholding transparency and accountability through clear and lawful guidelines. The next priority for our association is the name change report required. The Minnesota Sheriff's Association supports amending Minnesota Statutes 2024, Section 624.714, Subdivision 7A, to require individuals holding a permit to carry to report a legal name change to the issuing sheriff's office within 30 days. Under the proposed change, failure to report such changes, as well as address changes or the loss or destruction of a permit card, would result in a petty misdemeanor with a maximum fine of $25 for the first offense. Our next topic item is sexual assault investigations within the Minnesota state-owned military facilities. The Minnesota Sheriff's Association recommends amendments to the state statute 299C.80 regarding the investigation of sexual assault cases involving United States Armed Forces personnel. Expanding the investigative authority of the BCA ensures that incidents occurring on Minnesota state-owned military facilities are handled by a neutral, expert, and consistent investigative body. This approach promotes fairness, accountability, and consistency in investigating serious offenses, upholding the integrity of the criminal justice process for the United States Armed Forces personnel, as well as the public. Our next topic is public safety radio replacement. The Minnesota Sheriff's Association supports statewide funding to replace radios connected to the Allied Radio Matrix for Emergency Response, commonly known as the ARMOR system, which serves as the backbone of public safety communication in Minnesota. Many of these radios have reached their end of life and will no longer receive manufacturer support, making them vulnerable to failure and limiting their effectiveness during critical incidents. Ensuring reliable communication is essential for coordinating emergency response and protecting both the public and our first responders. Statewide funding would allow agencies to update this vital equipment, ensuring continued interoperability and maintaining the high standard of communication necessary for effective emergency management. And our last priority item is the employer refusal to provide employment background information. We all know how important it is that we have effective backgrounds in our public safety arena. And the Minnesota Sheriff's Association recommends changes under state statute 626.87 to ensure that employers provide critical background information promptly and that there are sufficient deterrents against withholding compliance. The proposed change in law does 3 things. It specifies that employers must respond within 10 business days of receiving a request, ensuring no delays in critical law enforcement hiring processes. Second, it streamlines the process for obtaining a court order to prevent unnecessary administrative burdens. And lastly, expands liability for willful violations to deter employer refusal. Law enforcement agencies quite simply rely on thorough and accurate employment background checks to hire qualified individuals and protect our public safety. Enhanced penalties for noncompliance ensure accountability while preserving the integrity of the hiring process. The enhanced penalties would be dedicated to the Youth Intervention Program grants. We also maintain an ongoing focus on a variety of issues not listed today, but needing attention. As you heard earlier, hopefully we were able to hear earlier, we clearly recognize the recruitment and retention issues facing public safety in the law enforcement community today. And we recognize that they do and will continue to affect the safety of our community members. And I'd like to close with two comments. And the first is that we want to be your partner and to be a part of writing success stories for our state. Not just to be invited to the table to explore fixes, such as what happened during the SRO legislative process. If it affects us and those that we proudly serve, please include us in the dialogue. We want to be your partner. And second, and lastly, public safety needs to remain nonpartisan, as our protectors are here to support and protect every single one of us, and as such, deserve all of our support. I want to thank each of you for your leadership, not just in your communities, but across the state, and for your service to our communities. And I also thank you for your time today. The MSA looks forward to continuing the pursuit of excellence as we humbly serve our elected sheriffs who proudly serve and protect every single Minnesotan. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff Stewart. Does anybody have any questions? Representative Whitty.
Thank you, Chair Novotny. Sheriff Stewart, thank you for what you've done. Thank you for your partnership in the school resource officer. We need to have our stakeholders at the table, and hopefully, I appreciate your teamwork on that.
Thank you.
The training that is required in the Castile that just got cut, that is the help train, but also to professionalize and all that, and it's mandatory. And so now it'll be a unfunded mandate. How much is that gonna be costing our communities?
Across the state of Minnesota, that would be a $6 million change from the agreement that was originally brought out. If you recall some of those additions, I apologize, Mr. Chair. Some of the items that were included were the relation to mentally ill on incidents, as well as autism, and those mandatory training requirements. That added funding was to supplement or to augment those mandated training sessions, which, as I indicated, we recognize won't go away. So the funding is very critical.
So those funds will now be passed on through the cities and the local police departments and
Mr. Chair, Representative Woody, yes.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, in the interest of time, and we can get the committee wrapped up, thank you, Sheriff Anderson, for your presentation. And I promise the members of the public that are listening to this that this is not my normal voice. And I will get better. Thank you, Sheriff Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We'll now move on to the presenter for the Minnesota Police Chiefs Association. Is it Brady Jewell?
Correct, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chief Jewell. Please introduce yourself and begin your presentation.
Feels like I'm sitting low. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify this afternoon. My name is Brady Jewell. I'm the Chief of the Savage Police Department. I'm speaking today on behalf of the Minnesota Chiefs of Police Association. We represent more than 300 police chiefs and 150 command staff members from across the state. We appreciate the opportunity to be here today to share some information about MCPA and our chiefs' experiences with you. Over the last few years, the law enforcement community has faced challenges. We would like to share them with you for your awareness. Number one is recruitment and retention. You've heard that echoed here by my other associates. It remains a huge challenge for police departments across state. Approximately 15 agencies have closed down over the past 3 years simply because they could not find candidates for their open positions. Over the last few years, the legislature has implemented additional training requirements that you also heard mentioned. With this, we would support the continuation of the $6 million in funding dedicated to the continuation of the post-board training reimbursement fund. That gives money to local agencies to present mandatory training. This fund began in 2018 and has been extremely beneficial for the department in several ways. It has kept training affordable for departments to meet state mandated training, such as recognizing and valuing diversity, cultural differences, conflict management and mediation, crisis intervention and mental health awareness, along with de-escalation tactics and duty to intervene training. We also like to highlight the instances of fleeing a police officer. It remains at a very high level. There were 2,262 agency-initiated pursuits in 2023. This has been an issue for several years, and therefore we'd like to address this dangerous crime by creating stiffer penalties for those who flee from police. Number three, the auto theft continues to be a major issue in our communities. According to the BCA crime report that was released in August of last year, there were 15,612 vehicles stolen in 2023. That is a nearly 30% increase from 2019, when there were 11,410 vehicles stolen. We'd like to address violent crime. It's a major issue. While violent crime rates did decline in 2023 by 6.9% over 2022, violent crime is still 32% higher than in 2019. For example, the murder and aggravated assault rates are significantly higher than 2019 numbers, with 181 murders in 2023 compared to just 117 in 2019. Also, aggravated assaults, 9,986 aggravated assaults in 2023 compared with just 6,700 in 2019. Aggravated assaults are assaults with a weapon and cause great bodily harm. Another issue for us, assault on police officers. This is an alarming statistic in the area of assaults. There were 1,206 police officers assaulted in 2023. In 2019, for comparison, that number was just 467. That's a 61% increase in assaults on police officers over a 4-year period. We all remember that there were 4 officers killed in the line of duty in 2024. Those include 2 officers and a fire medic in Burnsville, 1 officer in Minneapolis, and an officer from the Red Lake Tribe Police Department. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, I'm going to be much more brief than my partners. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to testify here today. We look forward to continued conversations throughout this legislative session, and we want to be a partner with all of you and the other committee members for the session now and then in the future.
Thank you, Chief Joel. Members, we have 15 minutes. I don't think we'll move on to do the half presentation that we were planning for the end. So, members, if you have questions, feel free to use them at this time. Representative Bliss.
Is the member from the Sheriff's Association still here? My question while you're walking up is, we mentioned the need for the mental health facilities, and that you said 1% of the budget surplus would have fixed it. Can you give me an example of what's needed? Do we need a new facility, a multi-room facility, similar to like a state hospital, or what do we need?
Sheriff Stewart.
Mr. Chair, Representative. So in short, we need beds. And of course, the beds would require doctors along with them and support system. I don't pretend to be able to speak on behalf of the mental health systems, but I would certainly anticipate that they would say, we need beds, we need staff. We recognize that there's facilities around the state that are currently closed that seem like it would be easy to reopen, easier than starting from a new construction project, and or supplementing some of the current facilities and expanding the number of beds within those facilities that aren't at full capacity according to what we've been told in other groups. And so the short answer would be, I don't want to speak for them, but we need beds and support.
Just one more real quick follow-up. I'm assuming there's crisis mental health beds we'd need, but then also long-term as well. correct? So there's two areas? Yes, sir. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, may I add?
Chief Jewell.
What we're seeing in my community, we have a co-responder unit, and what we're finding is exactly as the sheriff said. It's the short-term stabilization mental health that we're having a huge problem with. There are no beds for the short term to get somebody who's in crisis, who might be put on a hold. We have to find a permanent bed or a locked facility bed, and what we really need, and this is according to NAMI and the crisis counselors we have, are more staff for those type of facilities, where it's the I think they're calling it 4 to 2 week day period to get somebody stabilized back on their meds, so they don't have to go to a long-term, more lockdown type facility. So we need funding for the training of those mental health professionals at all different levels. Embedded social workers, crisis counselors, and then the long-term mental health rehabilitation staff.
Representative Engen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you guys for all you do. Curious, want to dive into the UAV deployment that you discussed. What is it that you guys envision this, kind of this all working out, and are there any other instances in which a UAV deployment might be beneficial, not only to public safety, but officer safety as well?
Sheriff Stewart.
Mr. Chair, Representative, absolutely. If you can imagine it, we know our public safety, our first responders and our protectors are responding to it. And so those situations, there's a wide variety of opportunities in which the UAVs could be deployed to make for safer environments and better outcomes. We're trying to tread carefully in acknowledging those areas that might be least controversial or least resistance, but certainly any situation in which a rapid deployment of a UAV might save lives would be ideal.
Representative Whitty.
Thank you, Chair Novotny. Both of you, what do you think are the factors? What are you seeing, why the high increase in assault and on law enforcement right now, why they are under attack?
Me. All right.
Chief Jewell. Or Sheriff Stewart.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, Representative, the world, according to Jim, would say that after years of anti-law enforcement rhetoric and propaganda and a lack of accountability for negative behavior has created an environment in which some people find it necessary to keep pushing the boundaries and then to push them a little further and to push them a little further. And when that last line of defense to try and maintain decorum within a community are those individuals who have chosen a profession in service to others behind a shield, that's who often takes the brunt of that.
Mr. Chair, may I address
Chief
that as
Jewell.
well? I can bring up a specific incident that I think really highlights this. Late this summer, one of my officers was working on a detail at a local amusement park, and a large crowd of people, and a disturbance broke out. My officer, one of my young officers, responded and tried to break up the disturbance, and in that disturbance, all of these parties were juveniles. That officer was thrown down, and then someone stomped on his head when he was down. Because of the police response there, we were able to immediately arrest that individual, put that juvenile in the back of the squad car, and he was laughing and goes, "What, I'll be out in 30 minutes? And his face changed when the officer said, "You're in Scott County." That individual started to cry in the back seat when he realized he was actually going to be booked in jail, and there were consequences for his actions. And I think criminals are emboldened by a lack of consequences. There are no immediate consequences to their actions. And then what we're finding is when someone commits a crime and they're back out right away, again, they're emboldened that there are no consequences for their actions. And so just that one thing highlighted for me that that mentality of that juvenile is, I'm gonna be right back out. And when he wasn't and ended up spending 3 days in a detention facility in Carver County, it really changed his perspective of what he thought he could get away with.
Representative Engen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry to interject one more time. Are you guys seeing a difference in morale or recruitment and retention, particularly in Hennepin County?
Mr. Chair, I'm in Scott County, and I'm very it's a very rare thing that of my partners, I can say I am fully staffed and I have no police openings. But that hasn't stopped me from recruiting and retention. The only reason I was able to get to that position is because of my feeder program through the Community Service Officer program that we have at the Savage Police Department, where we develop talent to step into those positions. Of my last 4 hires, 3 of those came from my Community Service Officer program. So, but that is rare that I'm able to say that, and my prior chief, my predecessor, had built that program for that reason, and I'm very lucky. But it is the #1 thing for the Minnesota Chiefs of Police Association, especially as I've testified here before. We are seeing a cliff that is going to be coming in the next 2 to 3 years of officers my age at from 50 to 55 that are becoming eligible for retirement. 20 to 25% of our officers are incentivized to leave in the next 2 to 3 years. And we do not have the pipeline capacity to fill those spots. And it's what keeps me up at night, Chair.
Sheriff Stewart.
Mr. Chair, Representative, specific to the Hennepin County inquiry, I think you're spot on. The profession as a whole has faced a lot of challenges, and the protectors, our colleagues that are working within Hennepin County are certainly no exception. And part of that challenge goes back to what the chief was talking about earlier with the accountability. But the other thing we need to be mindful of, why it's so much more challenging, is when you are wired, as you are in a service role as well, when you're wired to serve others and you actually care about making a positive impact in your community and trying to be a decent human being, but you're portrayed as the enemy, that's something that you can't describe, that's something that you can't necessarily explain to what it does to the mental well-being of the individuals who choose to still show up and serve and protect every single day, which is part of why we're seeing such gut-wrenching suicide rates across the nation right now. It's because they're wired to serve and to care, and I don't know that message is always getting out. And so within our partnerships and our colleagues that are working in Hennepin County, they just need to know that we all appreciate them.
Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the things I've come to appreciate after one term of serving on this committee in discussions with our members who are absent today is they have a different perspective on how the justice system should work. And I think sometimes folks on our side kind of paint with a broad brush and sweep it all under the rug. But what I've seen is in specific instances where you have these co-responding groups that show up to try to de-escalate situations, or you have programs that try to change the perception of how law enforcement is perceived by young people by coming alongside them in non-law enforcement scenarios, taking them fishing, throwing a football around, that sort of thing, that there have been positive impacts. I'd be interested in either of your thoughts or both on what kind of diamonds can be sifted from the sand of restorative justice, as they call it.
Mr. Chair, Representative.
Sheriff Stewart.
You heard me make the reference earlier to using challenges as opportunities, and that's one of the things that I've tried to embrace over the course of my career. And if I can digress for one quick moment, following the George Floyd riots, there were still a lot of unrest events all across the metropolitan area, including many in my own county. And I tried to go to every one of those events and to address the crowd. And when you first approach a group who has come to express their hatred towards you, it can be an uphill challenge. And oftentimes they would say, "What do you mean you want to talk to the crowd?" I said, "We're here to make sure you get your message out. We want this to be peaceful. We want you to, we're here to support your right to this opportunity and this free speech." And they said, "Okay." And one specific example I'll tell you is we got up, this was at the Anoka High School with many, many hundreds of young adults who were there to protest the police. And I addressed the crowd and I said, "Understand that from my perspective, I have not seen racism over the course of my career. I've seen bad behavior. And of course, I also understand that I'm standing before you in the uniform and you have no reason to take my word for anything more than what it is, just some guy talking in front of you. but I would ask that you come and do a ride-along, come and spend some time with our protectors and see the hearts that are behind these uniforms and to understand that they actually do care about you and your families. And then I think you're gonna be pleasantly surprised. But if I'm wrong, there's no better way to change it than from within. And I would encourage you to come and work for us and be a part of the change that you want to see. And so when I talk about challenges as opportunities, I'm happy and kind of proud to say, and I get goosebumps all these years later to say that as I climbed off the bed of that pickup truck, there was a long line of these young adults, mostly young black males, waiting to share a hug with me, waiting to share a prayer with me, share some tears with me. It was one of the most significant moments of my career because it reminded me again of the power of dialogue and trying to understand where each side is coming from. And I think too often that's what's lacking. We just need to get back to communicating.
Thank you. Thank you. Representative Rapinski.
Thank you, Sheriff, Chief, thank you for your service. Question about your drone usage. Do you have what I would call a mutual aid agreement with surrounding communities for your drone? You have somebody that's trained, and if another local agency, firefighter, EMT, first responder of some sort, could use that drone technology to their advantage at the scene, is that individual then called out and utilized? Does that happen at your, Sheriff Stewart?
Mr. Chair, Representative, so the short version would be we did not have MOUs in place or any type of JPAs under a state license, under the state license of the peace officer. We felt that that allowed them the ability to move around. Plus, we also had FAA national authorization through that process. When we created that program, I made an absolute commitment that if we're going to do it, we're going to do it right, and we're only going to make headlines for good things. And so we made sure we checked all the boxes and played by all the rules, and that at least according to the rules at the time, met all of those requirements and not needing a JPA.
Chief Jewell.
Representative, or excuse me, Chairman, and Representative, we do not have a drone program. We're dipping our toe into that, and we're investigating it right now. And there's different levels of operation. We have, Scott County Sheriff's Department has drone teams that try to have drones on 24/7 in the area. As Sheriff referred to earlier, it's all about response time. How quick can you get a drone in the air? And we're actually looking now at the next model, which is we have a drone placed on our police department that when we get a call, a high-level call, that drone is dispatched and sits above the house. And if a suspect is leaving, it can report right to dispatch, it's watched. We're looking at that model and the legality and the rules being changed for that, an automatic system. But we have had great success with our partners under just MOUs, normal joint power agreements, not specifically for drones. So we've had great success with that, and we're looking at expanding it. But the quicker you get them on scene for search and rescue, and we have had several dementia patients that have left and that have been found with the drones, and they've just been a huge success for us. The Pandora's box is open, we need them, and they're life-changing.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That'll conclude the presentations. Thank you for all being here. Before we conclude this meeting, reference to that interruption that happened previously, I'd like to take a moment to apologize to the members of the public and the staff that was here and had to be subjected to that kind of treatment and that kind of verbal assault. I'd like to thank the members of the sergeant's office that stood up and were doing their job and doing everything they could to protect us. So my heart goes out to them for standing up, for the members of the State Patrol that responded, for the members of the committee that wanted to do everything to do something and didn't. Thank you for restraining yourself. Members of the public, once again, I apologize that you had to be put up with that. I just wanted to comment that during part of that interaction or exchange, the leader with his bullhorn looked me straight in the eye and said that he hoped that I saw his face when I went to sleep at night. And I would just like to assure them that myself, just like many of the other public safety members that are on this committee, the ones that are in the crowd, the ones that are with the sergeant's office in their previous committee, in their previous service. They see faces, they see the faces of victims, they see the faces of family members that you've told that you've lost a loved one, you'll never see that loved one again. You'll see faces of autopsy victims. But I sure as heck tell you, I'm not gonna lose one bit of sleep on his face. This will conclude this meeting at 4:45.